Good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is October 17th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. I have some good news. I have been putting out for quite a while emails to get folks to come on the show so I can interview them about articles and other things. And I was, over the weekend and yesterday, I was feeling kind of sorry for myself because no one was, either they weren't getting back with me or they didn't want to get interviewed. And that's, that's fine. I don't mind if they don't want to get interviewed. It bothers me that people don't even get back to you. I take the time to hunt down their emails so I can send them an email. And lo and behold, I got two in the same week. I don't know if I'm going to have two interviews this week, but I got two being interested. One, I'm actually, and I can go ahead and say this, F.H. Buckley from the New York Post. He's a columnist over there. He's quite accomplished. We read an article the other day about how Trump's moves with the executive orders is bringing us back more to a constitutional government. And I thought that was an interesting take. I never thought about that. And I was reading through the article and I was quite intrigued with what he had to say. So I emailed him just on the off chance that maybe I can get him to come on the show and we can talk about his article, maybe talk a couple other things. So we tentatively I'll set this up for Friday, and it'll come on Friday's show about somewhere around 20 after. It's going to be a video interview. Now the other one, I haven't locked it down yet, but the other one I'm hopefully going to get that locked down. Now that will not be a video interview. He's actually, I think what I'm going to end up having to do is calling him with my Skype program and interviewing him just because he doesn't have, he's an older gentleman, doesn't get into all the video stuff, doesn't have Skype, and I'm like, oh, that's fine, we can go the old-fashioned way here, not that we have any dial-up phones or anything, but I can still do a video interview with him on the phone. So I haven't locked that one down, so I won't get into that one real quick, although I will tell you that it has something to do with participatory fascism. And I think that's an intriguing subject. We talked about it last week. We talked about, I never thought about it before until I started hashing out the different political economic systems that are in the world. You have capitalism, you have monarchs, you have fascism, you have socialism / communism. And the article that I read, and this was originally by Robert Riggs, put forth this idea, and I thought, I got to reading through that, and I'm thinking, he makes a lot of good points here. Now, Robert Riggs, declined an invitation, and I asked him, I said, is there somebody else I might be able to contact to talk about this, because I think this is an important subject that we need to sort of flesh out, as it were. And so he gave me the name to another gentleman. Like I said, I haven't locked anything down completely yet. Hopefully I'll hear back something from him today. With F.H. Buckley, I'm dealing with one of his assistants that sets these up, so I'm getting some really quick feedback and everything. So hopefully by the end of the show or tomorrow at the latest, I'll have that all nailed down, and we'll announce that for the show for Friday. I'll actually start getting Friday's show set up early this week. I'm excited to be able to interview, somebody about topics like this, like, what President Trump is doing is bringing us back closer to a constitutional government. Now, does that mean we're going to go all the way back? No. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask F.H. Buckley about this idea of a participatory fascism. Now, I did get some pushback on that video about participatory fascism. And the pushback I was getting was, well, there's no way that can be the case here in the United States, because we don't have the government killing a lot of people or trying to take out a lot of people, a lot of folks. Yes and no. Yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no, we're not actually physically killing folks, but through social media, through our political dogmas, through our identity politics, which we're going to talk today. I titled the show Identity Politics Create More Problems Than It Solves. I've been watching some videos, getting my head wrapped around this what they call third wave feminism, and I've been watching. It's called the factual feminist. This professor, and right off the top of my head, I can't remember who it is, and I'll put a link up in the show. But we're going to probably talk a little bit about that on Wednesday's show, about feminism and stuff like that, because this is something that keeps coming up time and time again with this identity politics. And when I do deal with feminists, I tell them I treat everybody like I want to be treated. I'm an American, and that's how I look at folks. Okay? But getting back to my point about participatory fascism, there are a lot of careers, there are a lot of businesses being destroyed over these type of politics. And so it doesn't necessarily, and I'm coming to I've been meditating on this and trying to reason this out. It doesn't necessarily mean if you're involved in fascism, and I think the power brokers of the world have this figured out, that you can't go as far as like Hitler did or Mussolini did and start taking out identity groups that you don't like, because in the end you turn everybody against you. Now, in the case of socialism and communism, when the revolutionaries take power, then the folks that are in power, that maybe the revolutionaries didn't take power, but they propelled somebody into the power position, those folks in the power position get kind of suspicious of the revolutionaries that put them there, because they feel vulnerable that this could happen again. So guess what happens? They do a couple things. They take away people's rights. They take away their guns. They just trample all their human rights, their God-given rights. And sometimes it goes as far as taking out the opposition. So, again, I think as we mature politically in the world, especially Western civilization, there are politicians that figured this out, that, look, we can, through laws and regulations, we can control the means of production. Maybe not own it, because that's going too far. But if we control the means, we can walk this tightrope between fascism and socialism. And trust me, folks, when I tell you that fascism always leads into totalitarian socialism. And these are, to me, and I would have to lump monarchies in with this also, because it is a totalitarian type regime, although most monarchies today do not operate like the monarchies of old that we see about in the movies and stuff like that. They're more of a participatory monarchy, where they have a parliament that, like I'm using Britain for an example, and that the Queen actually rules, but the parliament actually has the power in the country and that. So that's kind of I'll leave that type out, but the three major ones I want to clump together here: fascism, socialism, communism, and any type of totalitarian dictatorship, I lump them into anti-freedom political movements, because that's what they are. And if you think about it, we're always continually dividing people up into these identities or these characteristics that we want to pigeonhole people in. Now, I'm a Christian constitutional conservative. You'll see on my websites and that I'll say I'm a Christian constitutional warrior. I fight for the gospel. I fight to spread the good news of Jesus Christ and salvation he brings. And I live in a country that I feel that God has blessed us with, and I'll fight for the principles put forth in our U.S. Constitution, which is still in effect. And if I identify somebody by a characteristic, to me, and this is how I roll, this is how I operate, I do not just stop there and say, well, this person is this, and use that characteristic as an identity. And this is the problem with identity politics that we're getting into. And folks, I don't want to skew off into some rabbit hole we're never coming out of, because I'm just now starting to get my head wrapped around intersectionality. And trust me when I tell you, folks, that's a brain twister there. And this is something that they've come up in this identity politics scheme with feminism and leftism and all the isms that go in with that. And it basically has a lot to do, the cover for all this is identity politics. We want to identify people by characteristics. We want to identify, this black group here, and then the things that happen with inside that grouping. That black men, far and away, blacks are incarcerated more than whites. And it's okay to look at things like that from a statistical standpoint to see, if there's any type of solutions we can bring up or we can, implement. But to just separate that out and leave that out of context by itself, just let it free stand and say this is a problem, and it is a problem. But why is it a problem? You have to start digging down into the numbers. It's more of a tongue-in-cheek article here I have by Ronald Rayburn over at AbsoluteRights.com, White Americans Not Committing Their Fair Share of Crimes. Now, I don't want anybody committing crimes, but the way the argument has been framed, inside identity politics is that, we have this problem that more blacks are incarcerated than whites, and there's a disparity here. And so since there is a difference or a disparity between the number of incarcerated blacks and the number of incarcerated whites, there must be white privilege and white supremacy. That's how they draw their conclusions, which is you're taking a leap from this point to this point with no safety net in between. You're making illogical jumps and conclusions based on subjective feelings, or you feel bad for the black men or the black folks that are incarcerated. Okay, yeah, I do too. I don't want to see anybody locked up that shouldn't be. I especially don't want to be locked up because I know how semi-claustrophobic I am. I think it would drive me to the loony bin. But when you take an identity, I don't care what it is, feminism, gay rights, Islam, Muslims, if you take any of those identities in and of themselves and rip them out of the culture, set them aside and look at them in a vacuum, that's where you start creating more problems than you solve, because we don't live in a vacuum. And the problem with doing that is you are very subjective in doing that. Why are you picking on just this identity group here? Why are you just using this identity group here? That's a question that needs to be asked. In feminism, and this is, I've said this before about politicians, right? That they do not and cannot know our wants, needs, and desires because they cannot read our minds. And you cannot take a group. You can get some clues or ideas through polling and through statistical data and studies, all that kind of stuff. You can get an inkling. However, that only applies to that group. In my mind, it only applies to that group that you surveyed or you studied or anything, and you can extrapolate a few things out from there, but not everybody's going to fit into that study. Not everybody's going to fit into those conclusions. And I was watching the factual feminist, and I was trying to get my mind around, this happened a couple of years ago. It's called Gamergate, and there was some what we call third wave feminists. If you don't know what that is, look it up, please. Like I said, some of this stuff is really, really a brain twister. It really is. To wrap your head around what's going on in society today, and that's what I try to do on this show. But this Gamergate happened a few years ago, and basically these third wave feminists came out and said that because of what's happening inside of video games, that it's causing people to commit more crimes and injure or hurt people. It's causing men to become misogynistic towards women. And there was a couple other points. And I was, like I said, I was watching the factual feminist, and you know, folks, I guess I got to look this up real quick because I don't want to. I want to get her name out there, and for some reason, I just I can't get that out. And I should be able to. I was watching enough of her, Christina Hoff Sommers, and I heard this name years ago, and she's popped up from time to time on my radar. But she does this over at the American Enterprise Institute, this whole series called The Factual Feminist. And she was talking about this Gamergate, and I don't want to get down this rabbit hole, but basically these third wave feminists were blaming the games on society's ills. And that if we didn't stop them, that, you know, the women would be oppressed and all these kind of evils would happen. But they were saying these without being able to cite any facts, any studies. And once people started digging into this, once this became a thing, and folks in the know actually started digging into this, then all of a sudden it's like, well, none of these things that these third wave feminists say are happening because they're playing these games are actually happening in real life. Now, I'm not one to going into, and trust me, I tell you, I might be a little hypocritical here on this, and I'm working on it, folks. I'm not one to go into these very violent games like Grand Theft Auto, where in the game you're encouraged to break laws, you're encouraged to kill policemen, you know, even though they're virtual. And I'm not saying this actually relates to the outside world, where you're going to take those aggressions into video games and go out in the outside world. But I don't want to play them because I want to, first off, I'm a Christian, and I want to try not to put bad ideas in my mind, you know, on purpose. And two, the reason why I might be a little hypocritical here, because I do like my action movies. And I'm working on that, folks. I really am. I'm working on that. But to come out, and this is the problem with identity politics. This is a huge problem with what's going on with like the bakers and the florists and the photographers that are getting hammered by these gay right groups, these LGBT rights groups, that they can't, you know, you can't refuse a service because of your religious beliefs. And it seems because of identity politics that this is something that is more and more acceptable in our society. And I want to go back, and we'll talk about it when we'll get down here. Adam Smith has a concept in his books, The Wealth of Nation, of a concept of justice. I think is just fantastic. And if we would adhere to this, and I think his concept of justice actually goes along with the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat your neighbors, you treat yourself. Pray for your enemy and ask for blessings upon him. Don't curse him. These radical concepts that us Christians out here want to employ in our lives, and hopefully by example help other folks employ them in their lives. So I got a few articles here that I really want to get into. The first one's about Seattle. A Seattle coffee shop illustrates the bedlam surrounding the First Amendment by Edward J. Hamilton over at the Public Discourse. We'll get into all that. I have an article here about George Soros funded a study of white working class voters who support Trump. To me, I read that, I'm like, in this politically charged era of identity politics, George Soros funds a study of just white working class folks instead of just working class folks. Why do you have to separate that out? What is your goal for separating that out? And there are goals in identity politics, especially with the politicians and their supporters who want to play these games with folks in order to virtual signal to everybody that, look, I care about this group or I care about this group. And in doing so, in singling out these groups, you're neglecting all the other groups out there. Now, if I say I care about Americans and I want to make sure all Americans have the same opportunities on a starting line, the same level starting line, and those that need a hand, I want to help. Those that don't need a hand, I don't want to get in their way and impede them. And that's how I want to approach things. Of course, again, I've been accused oh, well, you're just a privileged white man. You can do that. And I'm like, I've never felt privileged as a white man. And even today, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around I'm a privileged white man. You know, because one, I've never oppressed anybody. And my ideas, if I bring out ideas you disagree with, and you say I'm oppressing, and I've been accused of this on Facebook, Twitter, and elsewhere, I've been accused of my ideas are oppressive. Well, they're not oppressive. They're just disagreeable to your point of view. And as my dad told me as a young man, there's only one person standing in your way of success, and that's you. Me. Point back at me. But I'm going to tell you, the only person standing in your way of success, and only you can define what success is to you. Never, ever, ever allow anybody else to define what success is for you. Only you know what success is for you. Okay? Disparity. I'm sorry, Dave. I get running here so fast sometimes. Like I said, I'm trying to wrap my brain around some of these concepts, and I apologize for some of the words that come out. Do I hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? No, I don't. Disparity, not dispargy. Well, we're just going to have an argy-bargy here, right? I've had people actually have to look that word up. That's not a word. Look it up. Argy-bargy. It is a word. I wouldn't give it to you if it wasn't a word. Roger Dodger, you old codger? All right. Today's episode is being brought to you by Sears Part Direct. If you go over to the danclemenshow.com and click on the Sears Part Direct widget, you get 10% off all the parts on lawn equipment and more. And basically anything that you can fix, an appliance or piece of power equipment, you can find the parts through Sears Parts Direct. And if you go to the danclemenshow.com and click on the widget, there is an offer code over there you can use to get 10% off your purchases. And more times than not, at least every time I've ordered, and it's been a handful of times, that 10% off has actually covered the shipping cost. And if you like what you hear on the show, you want to support what I'm doing here, please go over to the danclemenshow.com and support my affiliate marketers that are partnering up with me to help me try to help support this show. Today's daily Bible reading comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, verses 16 through 17. And when the scribes and Pharisees saw him eating with the tax collectors and sinners, they said to his disciples, "How is it that he eats and drinks with tax collectors and sinners?" Then Jesus heard it, and he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." A guy that isn't sick doesn't need a doctor. And we've seen that today in our society where the government's trying to force healthcare, or was trying to force healthcare on everybody. And there was a lot of young folks that were never sick and didn't need a doctor and didn't see the need for health insurance, but yet they were forced by the federal government to do so. And, so even though this isn't what he's talking about here, there is a principle there. He said, those who are well have no need of a physician. And just like those that aren't sinners don't have a need for to be called to repentance. But in a way, I think Jesus was doing this a little bit in tongue-in-cheek to the Pharisees there, because they needed Jesus Christ just as much as anybody that the Pharisees thought was the lowest sinner in that room, which would have been tax collectors of that day. Today's quote meal comes from Selwyn Hughes. "Those who doubt most and yet strive to overcome their doubts turn out to be some of Christ's strongest disciples." How about that? It's okay to have doubts. It's okay to have doubts, but we need to strive to overcome these doubts. We need to strive to put 2 and 2 together to equal 4. And if we don't get 4, we need to work until we get 4. And that's how, that's how God's word is. We need to strive to apply it to our lives, to put it in action in our lives. And if it doesn't quite work out, or if we doubt the outcomes, we need to keep working until we get the outcomes that are described in the Bible. A little bit of tea for the show here. I got up early this morning, had my 2 cups of coffee already. I was on totally caffeine free, and then that wasn't really working, so I went to half calf, and that seems to be great. I don't get the high boost of caffeine, and this is decaf tea, by the way, with a little bit of pumpkin spice cream in there. Today's short Bible lesson comes from Jack Wilkie over at focuspress.org, and this was published back on October 15th, 2015. The problem with how we view the church. And in the article, he talks about church shopping and church hopping. Now, up in our neck of the woods, we don't have that problem because the churches of Christ up here are few and far between. But the further south you go, the more churches are packed around in cities. My buddy Dave lives around Nashville. If you go on a map of the churches of Christ around Nashville, there's a lot of them over there. And this article is a really good article about this, that people, and this is something that I don't really struggle with, but I know people who do. And you hear me sometimes on Friday say, remember on Sunday, attend the church of God's choice, not your choice. And far too often I've seen people come into congregations and say that, I'm looking for this, this, and this. And although what they're looking for are good things, but they're not the most important things. I look for a church that's scriptural, that worships God in a scriptural manner, a cappella singing. We observe the Lord's Supper every first day of the week. Only men serve in the worship service. Only men teach the adult classes. When there's mixed company, there are a few exceptions to that, and it has to be an agreement with all men, but you don't see it very often. I want to make sure that the church I'm attending is the Lord's church and it's scriptural and it's following Scripture. Anything else above that's gravy to me, but far too many people come into the church with a preconceived notion of how the church ought to be. I've actually seen a young couple. He was a member of the church. She wasn't. They were attending for a little bit after they got married, but her problem was that she's seen too many sinners in the church that were supposed to be Christians. And her idea of what a Christian was someone that did everything perfectly. And folks, that's an erroneous idea. Nobody this side of the Jordan, this side of heaven, is going to ever get there. That's ever going to be 100% perfect. That's why Christ died for us. And to expect that in the church, you're putting an expectation that God and Christ never did. Now, he expects us to follow his word and will to our, how should I put this? To the best of our ability. And that's all God asks of us. That's all God asks of us. So that's a good article. I encourage you to go read that. Now, real quick here, if you haven't heard the stories in the, let me make sure I got the right one over here. If you haven't heard the story of this, it comes out of Seattle. As a coffee shop illustrates bedlam surrounding the First Amendment. And this, when you dig into the story, it has a lot to do with identity politics. Okay? There's a video that goes with this, but again, I haven't figured out yet. I'm still working on my video editing skills. I've not figured out yet how to go in and bleep out swear words. I think I know how, but I haven't got to that point where I can do that yet. So I'm not showing you any of the videos because I had to actually turn the video off myself. I mean, the thing was nasty. This guy was like nasty. I had to choke up on my earpiece. It was catching on my collar. I got a nice collar on today. I look kind of handsome. Anyway, this is by Edward J. Hamilton over at the Public Discourse of Witherspoon College Institute. This is one of their blog posts where they go and discuss these things. So on Sunday, October 1st, the owner of a coffee shop in Seattle confronted a group of customers, cursed at them, and forced them to leave the premises. That's the PG version. The specific details are decidedly less pleasant. If you have the stomach for it, you can view the entire exchange, and there's a link in the article here, and you'll see these over at the show notes page at thedanclemenshow.com. Please be warned that the summary I give below will reference sexual profanities. According to the reports, the customers were peaceful Christian abolitionists who have been, and we're not talking about slavery, or they're talking about abortionists. You know, they want to get rid of abortion is the term there. Who had been sharing their faith and pro-life views for several days, handing out literature, conversing with passerbys on sidewalks and public property. One of the group's members said they entered Bedlam Coffee to rest and enjoy a cup of coffee. They did not engage in any activity or advocacy or distribute literature while inside the shop. However, someone alerted the owner, Ben Borgman, to the group's presence. Borgman obtained a pamphlet from outside that the group had been handing out. The pamphlet featured an image of an aborted child as well as rainbow-colored imagery, along with an explanation of what the rainbow means according to Scripture, a symbol of God's long-suffering mercy toward sinner. Borgman then confronted the customers. Now, like I said, they weren't doing any of these activities inside. Okay? He confronted the customers, telling them, "I'm gay, you have to leave." He went on to state that the material offends me, told the group to shut up, and this is mild. This is the PG version, folks. And at one point asked the group if they would tolerate my presence if I get my boyfriend here and do some sexual act right in front of you. He added, "Tell all your friends, don't come here." Suffice it to say, the conversation went downhill from there. The group exited Bedlam Coffee. Coffee, cake, and flowers, a study in contrast. This entire exchange stands in stark contrast to several high-profile interactions in recent years. Here are just two examples. We have Jack Phillips as a cake baker, a cake artist in Colorado, owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop. In 2012, two men asked Jake to custom design a wedding cake for the same-sex marriage. Because of his religious convictions that marriage is a union of one man and one woman, Jack declined the invitation. However, he was told he also had told the couple that he would gladly sell them any pre-made baked item in the store or create a cake for them at another occasion. Baronell Stutzman, a florist from Washington, in 2013, a longtime customer and friend, Rob Ingersoll, asked her to design custom floral arrangements for his same-sex wedding. Baronelli responded by taking Rob's hands in her own and telling him, "I'm sorry, I can't do your wedding because of my relationship with Jesus Christ." She referred him to three other floral artists and embraced him before he left the shop. What happened to Jack and Baronelli? And of course, we're going down through there. Jack received death threats. He was compared to Nazis. Had to sacrifice nearly half his business. Notably, the latter two injustices were perpetrated by government officials. The couple had to attempt to commission the cake filed a complaint with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, claiming Jack violated a non-discrimination law. The commission agreed, ruling that Jack's decision to decline artistic commissions that violate his conscience was unlawful. Okay? And it goes on. If you heard about it, it goes on down through there. Bornelli received a flood of negative media attention after her shop. I'm just checking, something flickered on my computer. Anyway, a negative media attention at her shop was inundated with hate mail and profane phone calls. She was sued by her state's attorney general and the ACLU, and she faces the loss of everything she owns. The attorney general also condemned Baronelli during his political stumping throughout the state. What happened to Bedlam Coffee and its owner? It's too soon to tell what consequences Bedlam Coffee and Ben Borgman may face, if any. In his zealous prosecution of Bornelli, Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson stated that Washington law is clear. Business cannot discriminate. It's clear that Ferguson believes this principle applies to a florist who, for religious reasons, cannot design flower arrangements to celebrate a same-sex marriage, even though she has served and employed LGBT individuals for years. What's not clear is whether Ferguson believes the principle applies to a coffee shop owner who expels a group of people from his store because of their religious beliefs, saying, "I don't want these people in this place." So far, Ferguson has been noticeably quiet, and I've been checking, and he has been absolutely quiet on this. Because we're talking about LGBT folks are a protected class in our society. Again, identity politics. We want to identify these folks through these characteristics that they have. In the meantime, Out Magazine has hailed the owner of Bedlam Coffee as heroic, and before Yelp posted an active cleanup alert, the business had received at least 2 5-star reviews, with both reviewers applauding Borgman's action and one adding that Christian whiners should go elsewhere. Take your Bible and a long walk off a short pier, in other words. Non-discrimination laws and the First Amendment. And this is why we're talking about identity politics here today. Equality is a vital component of any diverse society. Freedom of conscience is also a vital component of any free society. When the two collide, the Supreme Court has repeatedly held that non-discrimination laws cannot supersede the First Amendment's guarantee of expression of freedom. Determining whether a collusion has actually occurred, well, that's the tricky part. On one end of the spectrum are business owners who choose to exclude an entire class of people simply because of their race, religious beliefs, or other characteristics. On the other end are people like Jack and Baronelli, artists who serve all people but decline to create custom art that celebrates events or expresses messages that conflict with their faith. Where do the actions of Ben Borgman fall in the spectrum? For now, we don't need to decide because Borgman isn't currently facing the loss of his livelihood. Jack and Baronelli are. Jack's case will be heard by the United States Supreme Court on December 5th of this year. Good. Baronelli has also asked Supreme Court to weigh in on her case. Neither Jack nor Baronelli is asking for a license to discriminate. They will serve everyone, but they do want the Supreme Court to protect the freedom of artists to respectfully decline requests to create art that conflicts with their deepest convictions. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I'll drink to that. And Edward J. Hamilton is an attorney who writes about constitutional issues. Here is, again, he brings it out in this, Ed here, Hamilton, brings this out in this article here. They came in, bought coffee, they sat down and were drinking it. They were not promoting their religious beliefs on there. They're just taking a break, talking amongst themselves. Bedlam Coffee and Mr. Borgman would not have known that they were even up there. Matter of fact, it was an upstairs room that they actually had went to, if you watch the video, unless somebody had told him that they were in there. Then he takes the steps to go out and get a pamphlet to see what they were passing out. And because he didn't agree with their agenda, then he kicks them out. They were not asking him to do anything. They were not asking him permission to pass out pamphlets. They were not passing out pamphlets at the time. They were not doing anything but conversing with one another and having a cup of coffee. That, folks, that is the very essence of discrimination. Now, does he have the right to do that? And I want to be consistent on this. Yes. I think any business owner has the right to discriminate, has the right to refuse service to anybody they see fit. I don't care what the basis is on. Now, we have laws against, discriminating against race. However, if you go back to pre-1964, before the Civil Rights Movement, especially down south, a lot of what the Civil Rights legislation did or enacted was, again, like a band leader getting in front of the band at the end of the parade. A lot of this work was already going on with private citizens and private businesses that didn't agree with the discrimination of separating black and whites and were allowing black and whites to mingle in their places of their establishment. And this, if you look at the history, especially in the United States and, well, actually throughout the world, more times than not, these ne'er-do-wells out there that want to change things usually jump in front of the ban right before it ends. Australia with the gun ban, they were saying because of the Australian gun ban, gun deaths are down. Well, what they don't tell you, gun deaths were already taking a nosedive before the gun confiscation. They have two of them. It was already on a downward slide before that happened. Child labor laws Henry Ford and the competition that he put forth, making the 5-day work week, 8-hour days, giving folks the weekend off, giving them a more than a living wage for that time and era that actually capitalism elevated people out of poverty where their kids didn't have to work. Didn't have to work. And so you see how free markets can actually, create these issues, that actually take care of them on their own. And yet the unions claim that they're the ones who brought the weekend in, the 40-hour week, and it just wasn't so. So we see here, I think this is different. And if Washington's going to be, consistent with their application of the law, that he should be indicted. He should be, arrested or whatever takes place, cited, for his discrimination. Especially when they didn't ask him to do anything but give him a cup of coffee. And again, he would not have known unless someone told him. So we see here where this guy in the he says he's gay. This Mr. Borgman, he says he's gay. He said, well, how do you feel if I brought my partner up here and we did a sex act in front of you? Well, I wouldn't stay to watch it myself, and I don't think most of them Christians there would either. And I think that's very gross on his part. Very just, again, folks that he identifies as gay. I don't go around, and I don't know too many heterosexuals, straight people, men or women, I don't care which color it is. I don't think most of us think about that. We don't go around saying, well, I'm a heterosexual male. That's not the first thing that even pops into mind. Matter of fact, it doesn't even really come into my mind when I'm talking to people. But the LGBTQ community, they got to put it right out in their face. That's one of the first things, I'm gay or I'm trans or, whatever it is. And it's like, okay, so that's only a part of you, a small part of your life, But they want to make it, and this is the problem with identity politics, they want to take this identity and permeate it throughout the rest of their lives and put it front and center in their lives. Like I said, I don't go around, like I said, it doesn't even really come into my mind. I don't go around, saying, well, I'm a straight heterosexual male. What do you think of that? And you don't see examples of that happening. Not in the broad scheme of things, not in a mass way do you see this happening. Now, getting on to, and I just want to show you, this is the Daily Caller. George Soros funded a study of white working class voters who support Trump. Here's what he found. Now, I imagine he was looking for something else. And I don't know, I guess people just leaked this because I don't think he would have wanted this to get out in the form that it is. Okay, and this is by Eric Owens. He's an education editor over there. He said a recently released study sheds light on the values of white working class voters in the United States and the reasons these voters are strongly support Donald Trump in 2016 presidential election. 3 researchers from 3 different universities authored the study titled White Working Class Views on Belonging, Change, Identity, and Immigration. Open Society Foundations, a network of political organizations controlled by left-wing billionaire George Soros, funded the study. Okay, and if you heard me talk about Open Society Foundation, they're the ones that they funnel all the George Soros money through grants and whatnot to support all these far leftist groups out there. The trio of researchers conducted the study by visiting a handful of places between August of 2016 and March 2017. Birmingham, Alabama, Dayton, Ohio, Tacoma, and Tacoma, Washington. I was just going to say something to Dave, but he probably already caught that one. Phoenix, Arizona, and some reason the New York City borough of Brooklyn. The researchers spoke candidly with over 400 people who identify as members of the white working class. Here's what they found. In 2016, Trump was the hope and change candidate for white working class voters. The participants in the study say they view Trump as strong and hardworking. The Trump campaign personified an insurgent, anti-establishment rage against politics as normal, according to the study participants. And let me stop the reading here. That wasn't just whites. That just wasn't white folks. That was he enraged this or brought up these feelings and these ideas across almost all working class specters, no matter how you want to identify them, no matter what their race and their religion or their ethnicity. He brought this up to conservative Americans who were tired of the identity politics of the left, that were tired of the hope and change of Barack Obama that never came about. Obama divided this country like very few presidents in our history ever have. When he got out of the office, this country was so divided and so polarized on so many items. And again, a study like this that's funded by George Soros, the Open Society, just to look at white working class. Why? When the Trump support is much broader than that. The reason why they did this, that they studied this, is they want to bring out the idea, I'm almost positive, because everything else I've read about what these leftist groups that George Soros is supporting, everything I read about them they just have this narrative that white supremacy is what propelled Donald Trump to the presidency. If you go over and watch Veritas Projects, a new video came out, American Pravda Part 3. Oh my goodness, I watched that this morning. Got to go see that. And you get the idea. And honestly, folks, when I see this, when I see these things come out, a lot of times, some of these phrases that Project Veritas is bringing out in hidden camera interviews are exactly what my antagonists on Facebook and Twitter actually use. I never realized it before until I started watching these, and I'm like, oh, they use this exact phrase word for word to describe me, or and just, I'm laughing, because these folks live in an echo chamber and they don't even know it. They don't even know they're living in an echo chamber. I'm just going to cover these points here on this. He said Trump hit the very deep, very raw cultural and economic nerve. Large swaths of Trump voters say they feel disconnected and disrupted by the conflation of economic and cultural change, according to the study. Trump's message, "Make America Great Again," connected with white working class communities who look back at a golden past and hope for a better future, the author of the study says. The refrain, "I feel like a stranger in my own community," was repeated in each of the case studies, lamenting the negative changes associated with increased levels of immigration and diversity, as well as economic disruption. Now, when they talk about diversity, that's another thing that falls under this umbrella of identity politics. It used to be when you came to America, you integrated into the society, the melting pot, and I'm a hate monger for even saying melting pot, but you embraced the American culture and you Americanized yourself, because America does have a rich, bountiful culture that is good to a certain extent and also easy to share, because we like freedom and we like liberty. And again, I question this study because it only looked at the white working class and not all working class. I think it would have been a very good study if they'd have went across all aspects of the working class Americans, no matter what your race, your creed, your religious affiliation, or whatever. Okay? Throngs of white working class voters utterly detest Hillary Clinton. The main reason why, folks, and I hate to boil it down here because there's so many reasons you can actually detest Hillary Clinton, but the main one was her proficiency at lying, at fibbing, at setting her pants on fire, as it were, being a Pinocchio when she pronounces things. She was and it still is, a pathological liar. And there are a lot of people, I don't care if you're white, working class or not, that do not identify with that see something wrong with that. Now, it amazed me that so many Americans in this country were willing to set that aside, that she was a pathological liar. That's telling on the character of some Americans out there. On Almost 50% of America who actually participated in the presidential election. Some 53 million voters didn't see a problem with her being a pathological liar. That says something about our society, and it's a sad statement on our society. Couple more things. White working class voters view themselves as hard workers who value honesty. And that goes back to the last point about detesting Hillary. They value honesty. Now, does that mean that every working class white person out there is an honest person? No. Do we sometimes stumble in our honesty with folks? Yes. We're only human. And we struggle with certain things in our lives. This may be one of them. But they value honesty. They really do. Especially in people they intend to put in the power of governance. White working class voters are sick and tired of political correctness and identity politics. Again, why I'm talking about this today. They're so sick of this. And honestly, I don't know. I didn't read through here where any of them had a problem with this being a white working class study going on here. But that's a whole nother point there. But definitely the sick and tired of political correctness and identity politics. I want to help people be the best Americans they can be. I want to help people to be the best Christians they can be. I don't care about your race. I don't care about your background. I'm not saying I dismiss it, but it doesn't come into play in my ideology. I want you to be the best American you can be. Wake up, America! Earl Pitts. White working class voters think white privilege is a bunch of idiotic claptrap. Amen. Amen. Again, I try to wrap my head around this thing of white privilege, which to me, that's not even a brain twister. It's like, what in the world are you talking about? And it goes into it speaks to the patriarchal system that third wave feminists say that's happening in the United States today, which it's not. And again, this is another way to divide us. And this is what identity politics does. It divides us. It does not bring us together, and it only divides us for the worse. And then it goes on there, white working class voters strongly oppose illegal immigration. Again, it goes back up to the value of honesty. They don't mind immigrants that come here. Most people I've ever talked to do not mind immigrants that come here legally. Matter of fact, as a young man, still in high school, when I was a junior in high school, I got a full-time job at a restaurant. I worked evenings and weekends and summers. Except junior, senior, I went to Army boot camp, but that's a whole different story. The guy that taught me how to cook was from India. His name was Krishan Gupta. And this guy came over, got passports for his whole family, but couldn't afford to bring them all over. He came over basically on a wing and a prayer. Rode a bicycle. He was there at the restaurant for like 3 years before I got there. Rode a bicycle every day. Matter of fact, it was about a couple months after I hired on there that Krishan finally bought a car. He saved up enough money to buy a car, but he didn't want to go, all out. He bought a really good used car. I think it was a Buick Regal, but it was an older one. And he was saved up all of his money. He lived in this little. I never did see his apartment. He described it to me. It was a one-room apartment with a bathroom, and it was very cheap, and it did everything he needed to do because he was putting away all of his money to buy a house and bring his family over, and I helped him fix up the house for his family to come over. And it wasn't shortly he brought his family over after I left for the Navy, but Americans are okay with that. He's very industrious. And he had a plan. He worked his plan out and brought his family over to America so they'd have opportunities he didn't have in India. He told me a lot about India over there, about the class system and everything, and how in America he was surprised that it really wasn't over here. Now, third wave feminists and some of these other supporters of that believe that there is a class system in America. And I suggest they need to go over and live over in India for a few years and find out exactly what a class system is. And they'll come back over here and go, oh, man, I was wrong, and we are nothing like that. So hard working class white voters strongly oppose illegal immigration because it's dishonest. It's dishonest. They came here dishonestly. The working class has been abandoned or exiled by the Democrats. And this is one of the reasons why they did the study. to see how they can get the white working class back. And it's never going to happen. Too many people in the Democrat Party that believe in identity politics have been so divisive in the country that they divided the country so bad that normal everyday Americans who are working class, I don't care what your skin color is just fed up with it. They're just fed up with it. And that's it. So, like I said, it amazes me that he even did this. Now, the last one I really want to get to here, I have some other articles here. You can go over and see them. Adam Smith's concept of justice. And we're going to talk about this more at length tomorrow because I think it's something important. I'm down to just 3 minutes. But I just want to get into this. This is by Dr. Vernon Smith. And he penned this October 13th of this year over at fee.org. One of the best-known quotations from Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, this is back in 1776, folks, defines natural liberty. Every man, as long as he does not violate the laws of justice, is left perfectly free to pursue his own interest, his own way, and to bring both his industry and capital into competition with those of any other man. Smith inserted the condition so long as he does not violate the laws of justice. Ahead of the directive because it was central to his conception of liberty. What everyone remembers is free to pursue his own interest, with the last often tuned into self-interest. But Smith's conception of human society and economy, I like the words humanomics, was far deeper than modern utilitarianism. And we'll have to get in here and define some terms tomorrow. I want to dig into this. This isn't a very long article. But he says, justice is the infinite set of permissible actions remaining after specifying the finite limit set of prohibited actions and corresponding penalties. What did Smith mean by justice, and why is it so important to understand the message? The carefully articulated answer was in his first book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, pages 78 and 79. He wrote that back in 1759, folks. This was during the Age of Enlightenment. I've watched a lot of documentaries on Adam Smith, and he was one of these brilliant men of that day, and he had a lot to say. We need to go over this some more. I want to dig into this because I think that personal responsibility, justice, not aggressing against somebody else, bringing your work ethic and everything that you have, your industry, in competition with other people, only makes you better. And it amazes me, folks, how we as Americans allow these divisions to stand from the anti-freedom folks out there. Folks, you really don't understand how much that bothers me to no end. That bothers me. Well, that's the music. That's the end of the show. Fear not, I'll be back with you tomorrow at noon. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for the right and just to be an American. And remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. We'll see you tomorrow at noon.